You are free, not because the world suddenly became gentle, but because you are finally willing to notice what your body has been trying to tell you for years. Control rarely shows up as a command. It shows up as a sensation, the tightening in your chest when their name flashes on your screen, the rush to answer the right way before you even understand what you feel, the mental spiral that starts with writing a defense, a soft explanation, a perfectly reasonable paragraph, as if your safety depends on sounding calm. You do not need a screenshot or a confession to know something is off. Your nervous system already recognizes the moment you are about to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. Here's the part most people never name. The problem is not that someone is powerful. The problem is that you have been trained to be manageable. Somewhere along the way, being good became being easy. Being mature became swallowing discomfort. Being loving became taking responsibility for other people's moods. So when pressure rises, you do not ask, "Is this healthy?" You ask, "How do I fix this fast so nobody gets upset?" That reflex is not your personality. It is conditioning. And it is exactly why reverse psychology matters here, because reverse psychology is not about playing games. It is about reversing the pattern your mind has been trained to run. In Jungian terms, this is where the persona quietly takes the wheel. The persona is the mask that helps you belong. It keeps you liked, safe, and respected. It is not evil, it is protective. But when it works over time, it costs you your truth. You start performing calm instead of feeling calm. You become understanding instead of being honest. You turn into the peacemaker, the translator, the stabilizer, even when your inner voice is begging you to stop. And then comes the strange question that changes everything. What if the most effective leash is not on your wrist, but in your mind? In the way you rush to explain yourself before anyone even asks? Here is the shocking truth. Control only works when you participate. It requires your urgency. It requires your fear of being misunderstood. It requires you to be seen as reasonable, even when you are being disrespected. That is why one small change can make the entire dynamic wobble. Not because you started a fight, but because you stopped playing your assigned role. You pause instead of rushing. You breathe instead of performing. You answer simply instead of proving your worth. And suddenly, the mask slips. The tone changes. The guilt hooks appear. You realize you are not imagining it. You are sensing the mechanism. Somewhere in midlife, a quiet exhaustion begins to speak louder than your manners. It shows up in the moment you stare at your phone and realize you are about to type another careful paragraph, not because you are wrong, but because you are afraid of what will happen if you stop. You know that feeling. The inner flinch, the urge to soften your truth before it leaves your mouth, the reflex to translate your needs into something palatable so nobody feels challenged. This is the exact doorway where the first reverse psychology experiment begins, and it begins in the simplest way possible. You stop explaining, not to punish anyone, not to play a power game, but to reveal what is real. Think about how often this happens in ordinary life. A husband asks, "Why are you upset?" And before you even answer, you feel the pressure to deliver your feelings like a court case, with evidence, footnotes, and a closing argument. A grown child speaks to you sharply and you find yourself crafting a gentle message so they do not accuse you of being dramatic. A coworker pushes a deadline onto you at 9 p.m. and you type a polite essay about your schedule instead of setting a clean boundary. Even friendships can run on this invisible labor. One friend disappears for weeks and returns with chaos, and you respond with warmth, reassurance, and zero accountability because you do not want to be seen as too much. These are not random moments. These are rituals of self-abandonment disguised as being nice. Reverse psychology in this context is not manipulation. It is a reversal. You reverse the role your nervous system was trained to play. Instead of proving you are reasonable, you become clear. Instead of explaining your boundary, you state it. Instead of managing their reaction, you let them have it. This is why it is a mirror. The moment you stop doing the emotional heavy lifting, the relationship reveals its real structure. The person who relied on your constant soothing often becomes unsettled. They may call you cold, they may escalate, they may suddenly act confused as if your calm is an insult. But calm is not cruelty. Calm is your system returning to itself. Calm is the signal that they no longer have automatic access to your fear. Jung would say this is where the persona starts to loosen. The persona is the version of you that learned how to survive by being pleasant, agreeable, and emotionally fluent. In many families and social circles, that persona was rewarded. You were praised for being the peacemaker, the good daughter, the understanding wife, the reliable friend. But the shadow of that role is resentment and fatigue, because every time you over-explain, you quietly communicate that your truth must earn permission. When you stop performing, you meet the discomfort of other people, and you discover something crucial. Some people only love you when you are easy to manage, so try it in the real world, right where your life actually happens. The next time you feel that urge to write a paragraph, pause, wait, breathe, then respond in 1 or 2 sentences with clarity. I cannot do that tonight. I will get back to you tomorrow. That tone does not work for me. Then watch what breaks. Watch who respects the boundary and who violates it. Watch who becomes kinder and who becomes controlling. This is not about becoming harder, it is about becoming true. And once you see what collapses when you stop explaining, you will understand the next truth. The most powerful control never looks like control. It looks like care. It often begins with a sentence that sounds like love, but feels like pressure. Not the obvious kind of pressure that raises alarms, but the softer kind that slides under the skin and makes you second-guess your own instincts. I just want what's best for you. I'm only saying this because I care. You're being too sensitive. And then the one that lands like a quiet slap. After everything I do for you, this is how you act? These words rarely arrive as threats. They arrive as concern, which is exactly why they confuse women who have spent a lifetime trying to be fair, kind, and emotionally intelligent. You do not want to seem ungrateful. You do not want to be labeled cold. So you lean in, soften your edges, and explain yourself into exhaustion. Without noticing the shift, care becomes a leash. Look closely, and you will recognize the pattern in scenes that appear perfectly normal on the surface. Sometimes it is a partner who checks in when you go out, with friends, yet the tone is not curious. It is monitoring dressed up as devotion. Other times it is a parent who calls 5 times in one afternoon just to make sure you're okay, while the unspoken message is that your independence makes them anxious and you are expected to soothe it. A friend might frame jealousy as protection, offering warnings about people they barely know, not because they sense danger, but because they fear you outgrowing the role you played in their life. And at work, notice how quickly "we're a family here" can become a quiet demand right before you are pressured to sacrifice your weekend as if loyalty should override your limits. These are not isolated moments, they are social scripts. And the older you get, the more you see how many relationships survive on your emotional flexibility rather than your well-being. Jung would say this is where the boundary between your psyche and theirs becomes blurred. You start carrying feelings that are not yours. You begin managing moods that are not yours. You wake up scanning the day for what might upset them. You rehearse your words in advance so you do not trigger disappointment. You call it love, responsibility, being mature, but your body calls it something else. Tension, hypervigilance, living in someone else's weather. Here is the shadow truth. Guilt is one of the most effective tools of control because it makes you cooperate willingly. Nobody has to force you when you have been trained to police yourself. That is why the experiment here is not to fight back, and you do not have to do it perfectly to begin. Start by changing your rhythm. Pause before you respond. Refuse to negotiate your worth. Do not apologize for their discomfort. Let the guilt wave rise and pass without turning it into a confession. If someone says, "If you loved me, you would," give yourself a breath, then answer calmly, "I hear you, and my answer is still no." If disappointment is used as a weapon, let silence hold the line. You are not being cruel. You are becoming clear. And when guilt no longer works, something beautiful happens inside you. The dynamic may shift, yes, but so does your inner world. You stop living on emotional alert. You stop begging for permission to be yourself. You feel the quiet freedom of standing in your own center, where care is real, love is clean, and your choices belong to you. When they cannot control your choices, they try to control your image. The backlash rarely shows up as a face-to-face fight. It shows up as a story that starts traveling without you. The moment you stop playing the old role, the words come out like they were waiting in a drawer with your name on them: cold, selfish, difficult, changed, and that sting is real. Not because you believe it, but because you remember how much of your life you spent trying to never be seen that way. You stayed polite, you stayed flexible, you kept the peace. So when someone suddenly paints you as the problem, it hits the tender place in you that still wants to be seen as good. This is the reputation trap. The goal is not truth. The goal is to pull you back into the version of you that was easier to manage. You have watched this happen in ordinary, everyday settings. The woman who stops answering the family group chat because it always turns into guilt and demands becomes disrespectful. The wife who stops smoothing over every conflict so the house stays quiet gets called dramatic. The mom who finally says, "Do not speak to me like that," to her grown child is labeled too rigid. And at work, the woman who used to say yes to everything starts protecting her time, and suddenly she is not a team player. It is almost predictable. When you stop being the emotional glue, the room feels it. And instead of admitting they depended on you, people often rewrite your character. This is what Jung meant by shadow projection in plain language. When someone cannot face a truth about themselves, they push that discomfort onto someone else. If they are controlling, they do not want to call it control. They call it care. They call it loyalty. They call it just being honest. Then, when you stop cooperating, their discomfort has to go somewhere. And because you are the one who changed the pattern, they place it on you. You become the screen they project onto. That is why the labels feel so personal. They are not describing your character. They are protecting theirs. This is also where many women exhaust themselves. They try to explain their way out. They write long texts. They over-clarify. They bring receipts. They try to prove they are still kind, still loyal, still safe to love. But you cannot win projection with words because it is not a conversation. It is a defense system, and every time you explain, you hand them another key to your mind, another chance to pull you back into the loop where you are busy being understood instead of being free. The shift comes when you stop defending your reality and start living it. You let your actions speak. You choose consistency over persuasion. You stay steady in your no, steady in your pause, steady in your dignity. And with that steadiness, something quiet returns. Your breath, your sleep, your sense of self. The drama runs out of fuel because you stop feeding it. The labels lose their grip because you stop carrying them. That is when control collapses because the game has no player. You do not defeat control by arguing. You defeat it by becoming unreachable to it. At some point, you stop asking for permission to exist. It does not come with a dramatic speech. It comes in a small, private moment when your finger hovers over the keyboard and you realize you are about to write another long explanation to someone who has never listened. You feel the old pull to smooth it over, to soften your no, to make your boundary sound like a request. Then you choose a different move. One sentence. Phone down. Breathe back into your body. That is the Jungian turning point. You do not just set boundaries, you become the boundary. This is where reverse psychology stops being an experiment and becomes identity formation. Not the kind that tries to control others, but the kind that reverses your own conditioning. For years, the script ran itself. Pressure comes, you respond fast. Discomfort rises, you explain longer. Someone is upset and you apologize to restore peace. Now you reverse the pattern on purpose. You do not reply under pressure. You do not deliver a broad and speech to justify your limits. You do not return to the cycle of apologizing to make the air feel safe. Each time you refuse the old script, your psyche learns a new truth. I do not have to betray myself to be loved. That repetition is how an identity is built. You see it in everyday life. A sister sends a sharp message, and you would normally rush to repair it. This time you pause, let the heat pass, and respond later with calm clarity, or not at all if the tone is disrespectful. At work, a manager corners you with, "You're the reliable one," and you recognize the hook. You say, "I can't take this today," and you do not add 5 reasons. Or in a marriage, you stop translating your pain into gentle language that protects someone from consequences. You speak plainly and let the silence be honest. With adult children, you hold the line. You do not chase them with reassurance when they are upset. You let them have their feelings while you keep your dignity. Jung would call this individuation in action. Individuation is not becoming someone new. It is returning to who you were before you learned to disappear. Some people will not like the change because their old mask made their life easier. When the persona falls, those who benefited from it may call you selfish or cold. Let them. Your body will tell the truth. Your shoulders drop. Your sleep deepens. Your mind stops spinning because you are no longer living in the courtroom of other people's reactions. This is the quiet miracle. When you become the boundary, your life reorganizes around truth. The ones who only loved your performance may protest. The ones who respect you will adjust. And the relationship with yourself begins to heal. You learn a new signal. Safety is not something you earn by pleasing. Safety is something you create by staying with yourself. And freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is no longer being led by fear. You are free when you return to yourself. And stay there. Not free because everyone suddenly understands you, approves of you, or treats you perfectly, but free because you have stopped placing your worth in other people's hands. That is why some people call you intimidating now. Not because you became harsh, not because you turned cold. You are intimidating the wrong people because you no longer abandon yourself. The moment you stop shrinking, the people who were comfortable with your silence start to feel exposed. Your calm becomes a mirror. Your boundaries reveal the games. Your pause interrupts the old script. And what they call attitude is often just the sound of your dignity returning. This is the real close of the story. Your goal is not to control anyone. Your goal is to come home to yourself and stay there, even when guilt knocks, even when labels fly, even when the old part of you wants to explain, fix, and prove. Jung would say the work is not to perfect the persona again. It is to outgrow the need for it. Individuation is the quiet decision to live from the center of your own psyche, not from the moods of the people around you. When you stop participating in what drains you, your power returns as identity, not as a performance, not as a mood, as something steady. And yes, life reorganizes when you do this. Some relationships soften into respect, some fall away. Some people get louder for a while because they are used to your nervous system being available on demand. Let them. Your task is not to manage their reaction. Your task is to protect the part of you that finally chose truth, because what you are building now is bigger than one conversation. You are building a new inner climate, one where your body can rest, your mind can quiet down, and your soul does not have to beg for safety. So do not let this be just another video you watch and forget. Make it a psychological marker, a line in the sand. Comment you are free like a vow, then choose. One vow for 7 days and keep it simple so your nervous system can learn it. Vow 1. No instant replies under pressure. If you feel the urge to respond fast, wait 30 minutes, breathe, return to your body, then answer calmly or do not answer if the tone is disrespectful. Vow 2. No long explanations. Say what is true in 1 or 2 sentences. Let your boundary be clear, not convincing. Vow 3. No returning to the apologize to keep peace cycle. If you did nothing wrong, do not trade your dignity for quiet. At the end of each day, write 3 lines. What triggered the old script? What boundary did I hold? How did my body feel after I stayed with myself? That is how you turn insight into change. That is how you stop living inside someone else's orbit. Because in Jung's world, the life you want begins the day you stop performing for belonging and start living from the truth that was waiting underneath. You are not losing people. You are losing the illusion that you had to disappear to be loved. And when you return to yourself, you do not just feel free, you become it.
If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.